Erev Tov, Rosh Pina, and good morning in Pittsburgh. Welcome to all of our friends of Israel from around the world. We have a really exciting episode today of our Friends Indeed series from the American Israel Friendship League. My name is Wayne Firestone. I'm the executive director of the American Israel Friendship League. Today, sitting here near our nation's capital, wondering whether all of the baseball fans that have been waiting for summer season to begin, and here we are, and some of us are still wondering. But for those of you here with us today, we really do have a special treat. You're going to get to hear about Team Israel and baseball in Israel, and we have some really exciting special guests for you today. Rabbi Jeremy Fine, Nate Fish, John Moscott, all people who know intimately about the story of baseball in Israel and are going to share with you an insider's perspective. So sit back, grab a hot dog, grab some popcorn, make the best of it. And, if you're on Facebook, we encourage you to host a watch party. The great Rabino just did that with his Facebook friends, and I did that with mine. And we'll see who's sort of going to ditch their lunch hour and get the best of a little baseball in, a little baseball talk over lunch. Our Friends Indeed series is really an expression of the friendship and common values between the United States and Israel. And what better way to really express that with a game like baseball, where you could go with your family and you can and your friends and sort of hang out for an afternoon. And it turns out that Israel is on the map with its baseball team as well. And that's one of the things we're going to be exploring today. So let me turn over to you today, Jeremy. By the way, anyone, if we always like to start by finding out where people are. Has anyone ever attended a baseball game in Israel? Why don't you let us know that in the chat or on Facebook? And if you are a partisan for any particular Major League Baseball team, you could also put that in there as well, and maybe we'll share a little love with all the players out there that are working hard during a very, very difficult summer with many, many different challenges. We hope everybody stays safe, obviously. And for now, we're going to just talk about baseball and not actually play. So I'm going to turn over to you, Jeremy. Tell us a little bit about. I know you are a crazy baseball fanatic. And only a so-so softball player at Camp Ramah, but we won't hold that against you. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect for today.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. I'm so excited to be here with the AIFL and sharing in this awesome discussion with two really, I would say, experts on the topic. I come to this from writing a Jewish sports blog for about 11 years and have had the honor and privilege of meeting John and Nate and many of the players and those associated with Team Israel. So it should be great. Baseball is back, and it's all the more so we should be talking about it. And if we're plugging teams, my White Sox have won 6 in a row. I'm really excited. But since John is on here, I'm going to let him tell the story a little bit. We all have to be a little bit of a Reds fan, I think. So, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about your relationship with the game of baseball, sort of how you worked up the ranks and how you got to be a professional baseball player?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure to be here with the AIFL. Jeremy, you're the man. Always great to talk. And Nate, Nate's nickname is the King of Jewish Baseball. So Nate is the king over there, and excited to hear from him. But I just wanted to say thank you. And my relationship with baseball started when I was really young. I would go to Chabad, and then after Chabad, my dad would take us out to the Little League field, and we'd go out and play when I was 7. So I started back then, grew up playing baseball, went to high school, played, ended up going to a Christian university, actually, which kind of just went over my head when I was going there for a scholarship for baseball. But obviously when I went there, it was very stark to me that I was the only Jewish guy on the team. So it kind of, everyone would come to me asking me questions about what is basically Judaism, kind of. And I was like shocked, because most of my life growing up and where I grew up, most people knew about the religion and faith and everything that comes along with it. And so being there at that university was kind of an interesting exposure, and kind of what I experienced in professional baseball as well, with most players not necessarily relating to the Jewish faith or understanding kind of what it is that we believe in. And so that's a little bit about the backstory of my faith and growing up. But as I grew into my career, I played with the Reds, got drafted in the 4th round in 2012, came up through the system, made it to the major leagues in 2015, and ended up getting hurt both years that I was up in the big leagues. So I spent like part of 2 seasons up there, and never actually made it back onto the field. But the last time that I was able to play was this past winter in the qualifying tournament for Israel in Europe, and that pushed us into the Olympics. So have kind of come back a little bit, been able to play since my injuries back in 2016, and really excited, looking forward to next year in Tokyo as we go there as a team trying to get a medal.
So we're going to come back to the Olympics in a moment, and John will be a big part of that team. So Nate, discuss a little bit your relationship to the game of baseball, how it grew and where it is today.
Sure. Hey, everybody, just wanted to say hi and thank you, to echo what John said initially. I am from Cleveland, Ohio, grew up playing there, went to the University of Cincinnati, sort of a fun Jewish baseball fact. Good friend and teammate of mine there was Kevin Youkilis, who went on to have a great big league career and be one of the guys that all the Jewish fans are following, because he is somewhat vocal about his background and being Jewish as well. Didn't get drafted after college and sort of went out into the international baseball realm. Played for a couple years in Europe. Was introduced to baseball in Israel in 2007 when there was a professional league there. I played third base for the Tel Aviv Lightning there. And that sort of set this whole chain of events into motion, where I would return to Israel to help, coach the national team. I was with Team Israel for the 2012 World Baseball Classic, and then moved to Israel for 3 years to be the executive director for the IAB, the Israel Association of Baseball. Rejoined the team again for the 2016 and 2017 World Baseball Classic qualifier, and then the main tournament. I actually was not with the team. I know we haven't gotten to this yet. I wasn't with the team last year for like the big qualifying run. It was the first sort of major event in Israel baseball in about 15 years that I had missed. I was working as a minor league coach with the Dodgers and couldn't get the time off, but I'll be rejoining the team on the coaching staff as the third base coach next summer for the Olympics. So it's a long and winding road with baseball and with Israel and the intersection of the two.
Awesome. Yeah. So both of you touched on this a little bit, but I want to, before we get into sort of the Olympics and Team Israel and all the great things that have happened. So John, you spoke about your Judaism a bit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Judaism and baseball? Did those ever come into conflict? Did you ever have to make decisions? And Nate too, obviously Kevin Youkilis is very vocal, especially after his playing days. He's been an incredible voice against anti-Semitism, things like that. So how have you molded how did you balance your Judaism and baseball and as a sport?
Yeah, no, great question. I guess to me, it was always something that it was something unwavering in my life, right? It was never a question of who I am or what I believe in. And with that in mind, I was always willing to talk to other teammates and guys about it. Never felt hesitation about discussing it. And, a lot of the Latin players that I played with were very interested, more so than even the Americans, and because they've never been exposed to that. And they just wanted to learn. And so it was actually very, very interesting conversations that I would have with guys about, different faiths and backgrounds. And I think that it promoted inclusion, and it always made me feel good about, teaching other people about Judaism and where I come from and what I believe in, and kind of strengthen my faith. And I'll tell you a funny story. I was out in Arizona. I was in rehab for my elbow. I had an elbow surgery, and say that sometimes and people look at me all cross, but knee rehab is injury rehabilitation. So I was out, it was 100+ degrees, and you know, in the Yom Kippur rolls around, and I'm looking for a place to go to temple, you know, and I'm looking around, I'm asking around, and as I'm looking on Google, I'm trying to figure everything out. And sure enough, something comes up in the clubhouse as I'm sitting there, you know, doing my arm stuff. And one of the coaches walks in, and he's like talking about where he's going to temple that night. And I looked over and I was like, wait a second, you're Cuban. It's like, what? So we started talking, and I didn't realize that our pitching coordinator was a Cuban Jew. And so we hit it off. We had a great conversation, and we ended up going to the same temple, and we had a great experience. And it's kind of been a bond between us now that has solidified us and kept us in touch. But, you know, just funny stories like that. You know, when you come in contact with somebody who's Jewish and you have that relationship and you're in the clubhouse together, it's like a bond that can't be broken. So that's my experience with it a little bit.
Nate, yours as well. Obviously, living in Israel for a little bit, but how was the sort of your balance with Judaism and baseball?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up. My mother had wanted to be a rabbi. excuse me, back in the 70s. I was born in 1980. Was raised in a conservative household. Father's a Jewish guy from the Bronx, sort of prototypical New York Jew. So had a sort of a pretty strong, you know, religious education growing up. Not overly religious, but it's just a huge part of our lives. You know, the humor, the books, the food, you know, we did Shabbat on Friday nights. And then once you step into the baseball realm, like John said, you're often the only Jewish guy on the team. Occasionally I would have a Jewish teammate. When I got to Cincinnati, and me and Euclid were hitting in the cage my freshman year, he was 1 year older than me, started talking and found out he was Jewish. Same thing. It was sort of an immediate bond. He's also a very funny guy, good sense of humor. So we hit it off, and we were actually split up that day because we were talking too much and laughing too much. The coaches had to split us up. But you very rarely come across other Jewish players. And so, I mean, I remember in college, I think it must have been Pesach, and we were down in Tampa or something playing. I think it must have been against South Florida, but I couldn't play, and I had to explain to the guys why I couldn't play, and I had to go, you know, find somewhere to have a Seder. And so several times throughout my career, you know, I'd miss games or something like that, not for Shabbat, but for holidays. And then one of the funny things about Team Israel that's sort of cool is every guy on the team has sort of been the one Jew on each of these teams throughout their lives. And then everyone all of a sudden is on the same team and have this really strong commonality and, you know, similar experiences in being this sort of outcast. I mean, not that your teammates are ever bad to you, you know, because of, you know, the bond of baseball in general. But everyone has the common experience of being the only Jewish guy on the team for so many years. And then all of a sudden you're playing on a team of all Jews, and it really does a lot for the chemistry. It's sort of a cool experience.
Yeah. So yeah, I was on a conversation the other day with several players, and they said, like, once you put the jersey on, it doesn't matter. But before the game, like, if the opponent or someone on your team, there's sort of like a tip of the cap just to acknowledge it. Nate, I want to stay on Team Israel baseball, because you were such an integral part. In fact, I think when we first met, you were just promoting the team. And I was like, there's a Team Israel. If I don't know that there's a Team Israel baseball, I have a feeling not a lot of people know. And I actually got offered, even though I didn't play, to sort of play in some of those early leagues. Mm-hmm. But take us sort of, how did Team Israel baseball really evolve? Because of all the people besides Peter Kurz, who is an amazing executive director, you probably were in the thick of it. So go down that path.
Sure. So I was talking about this a bit before, but in 2007, there was an attempt to bring professional baseball to Israel. This guy, Larry Barris, he's a businessman from Boston, started something called the Israel Baseball League. It was a 6-team league that ultimately failed. I mean, Israel is not set up to sustain a professional baseball league, and infrastructure, fans, everything like that. But it set this core group of people, including myself, Eric Holtz, who's the manager for the team for the Olympics, several other people that are still involved in Team Israel. So the league failed, but in some ways it succeeded in creating some momentum to bringing baseball to Israel. Baseball in Israel started in the mid 80s. It's maintained a very, very low profile. There's about 1,000 kids playing there in 16 cities throughout the country. So, it's like any baseball program. It's just in Israel. There's a little league, there's a 12 and under division, a 15 and under division. There's a men's league for the older guys that are still playing. And so it resembles a baseball program anywhere else. It's just, somewhat underfunded. There's not baseball. It's not a big part of the culture. There's not facilities and things like that. As far as the team for these larger events like the World Baseball Classic and the Olympics in 2012, so 5 years after the Israel Baseball League was established and went defunct, Israel was invited to the World Baseball Classic, which is the biggest baseball tournament in the world. It's essentially the World Cup for baseball. Because Major League Baseball recognized there's a lot of Jewish Americans involved in baseball, players, executives, things like that. And Israel could put together a pretty good team of minor leaguers and recently retired major league players that were Jewish. And so we were invited to qualify for the World Baseball Classic in 2012. Ultimately came up short, but in hindsight, it was another one of these stepping stones because we got invited back in 2016, qualified for the tournament, and then participated in the main tournament in 2017 and had a pretty good run. We ended up finishing 6th in the world. So it has gone, a guy like Shlomo Lipitz, who some people may be familiar with, was on, I think Shlo's about 41 years old now. He was on that very, very, very first Israel national team in the 80s. It's a 12 and under team that went to Germany to play in a youth tournament. They lost their first game to Saudi Arabia 54-0. And Shlo and other guys have been on every single national team through this progression of starting baseball in Israel to growing it all the way up into the World Baseball Classic and the Olympics. So it's been a really, really, 30-plus year journey from very grassroots beginnings into going out onto the world stage now.
Yeah, so we're watching this is Peter Kurz, who's so important to this, if not the most important. And Peter wanted to mention this heritage rule, which means if you have the right of return to Israel, you can qualify for the World Baseball Classic. A little different than the Olympics, where you actually have to be a citizen, which is why a lot of, including John, a lot of players went over to Israel, made Aliyah, so they can qualify to play. In fact, I think Dean Kremer was supposed to be the first Israeli to ever play in Major League Baseball. He's in AAA, or AA, AAA. He's a year maybe away from being on the team. He's on the 60-man roster right now. But as of yesterday, Ryan Lavarnway was called up to the majors, and I believe, John, did Ryan go over there with you to make Aliyah?
So Ryan did not go on that trip, but Ryan and I have spent a ton of time together. We actually were together last year with Cincinnati. So Ryan and I are very close. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really exciting news. So now let's talk a little bit about the Olympics. How did you talked a little bit how we got there. So the question is, what is the team projection for 2021, and can we win a medal?
You asking me, Jeremy?
Yeah, let's start with you, John.
I mean, we're not going into it anticipating that we're going to lose, right? We feel really good. We've got some big guys. We've got, a couple new additions in Ian Kinsler. And I mean, that's a pretty big deal. You get an MLB All-Star to join the team, and we've got some solid bats. I know that the guys that are on the squad are staying in shape, doing everything that they can to kind of ride this weird situation right now in the world out where we don't have access to gyms, but we're able to kind of, get our stuff done, figure it out, throw against the wall, get out and run. So we're feeling good. I know we had a call yesterday, and that was awesome to see some of the faces on the team, see guys in shape, hear what they're doing. And, I think from the top down, the entire organization, Peter to our head coach, to our pitching coach, they do a great job. Our scout, they do a great job checking in, making sure everybody's doing what they need to be doing. And I mean, we're all adults. We're all professionals. We all want the same goal. We all want to win, and we're going out there with the expectation that we are going to win. And you know, we're going to be going up against some good competition, but they know that they're going up against some good competition as well. So, you know, there's 6 teams in the Olympics next year. It's a pretty small sample of the world, but we're good enough to qualify to be one of those 6 teams on the world stage. So I would expect some good stuff from us.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many people involved in the team who aren't just players like John, from the Alex Jacobs of the world, and people, some really great coaches, either minor league or who have coached on the major league level. So Nate, are you, what's your prediction as the third base coach? Someone not playing now this time around. Yeah, I actually believe we have a shot at the gold. I mean, I really do, especially with Kinsler and Valencia in the middle of your lineup. I don't imagine there's going to be many teams with better bats than that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we rolled into the 2017 World Baseball Classic. I think we were 200-1 odds in Vegas. We were ranked 49th in the world. It was the lowest in the tournament by a lot. People really didn't give us a chance, but we prepared really well. Scouts did a great job. Coaching staff did a good job of preparing and sort of thinking internally within the team. We believed we were better than people were giving us credit for. We thought we could win. We thought we had a good plan, and you know, the guys matched up well. And it turned out that we swept the first round, won a game in the second round, ultimately lost to Japan. But you know, there's going to be a lot of talk about who's, you know, externally about who's going to, you know, medal and who's going to be where. But internally, we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to prepare and go out and compete. Anything. One of the big differences in international baseball compared to regular season Major League Baseball, really anything can happen. We've seen it so many times, whether as the favorites losing in 2012 or as the underdogs winning in 2017. They're very, very small sample sizes, and anything can happen. So, I mean, it would be huge for us to go out and medal and be able to bring a medal back to Israel. And, you know, internally, we're going to believe that we can do it, and we're going to give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that, remember, the Olympics for Israel is different than America, where America just sends tons and tons of people, and this is sort of the biggest team that Israel will be sending, and I believe it's history, at very least in the recent history, and that's really, really incredible. And as new developments come around the country in terms of new fields and projects through JNF and things like that, we're able to build better infrastructure and produce a team. I know we're going to show a video now. We're going to cue that so people can get a little taste and flavor.
Right-hander is working quickly, and he comes home. And this ball's flown out to right field. Simon Rosenbaum reaches up, and that's the out that ends it. We could say it. It's official. Next year in Tokyo, Israel's going to the Olympic Games.
Of the 32nd Olympic of Tokyo 2020 is Israel.
All right, we're back. So there's just a little bit of the celebration. Some of those games air at like 3 in the morning, and I'm probably one of the few suckers who was waking up at every single game and watching it. It was just so exciting to watch, and being the underdog and coming through both the WBC and the Olympics. So Nate, let's talk a little bit about the vision. You were there at the beginning. Do you think we're where we wanted to be? Are we behind? Are we ahead? Have we progressed? And you know, what's sort of that vision going forward for baseball in Israel?
Sure. I mean, in some ways we're behind, and in some ways we're ahead. I don't think any of us ever imagined that we were going to get invited to the World Baseball Classic and ended up doing so well. I don't know that any of us ever anticipated baseball coming back into the Olympics and then actually qualifying. We were long shot for that as well. So as far on the international level, way, more high profile experiences, an amazing community of guys in professional baseball that have now played for Team Israel. A lot of guys have made Aliyah and gotten Israeli citizenship. So those are things I don't even think any of us, including Peter and, Shlo and Dan Rotem and all the guys that have been in the mix this whole time. I don't know if any of us ever expected that. Within the domestic program, it still is lagging behind a little bit. It's still hard to somehow penetrate mainstream Israeli culture and have baseball really be one of the major sports there. It's been, really, really slowly growing the number of players in the country, slowly raising money to build facilities and build programs. So, there's two fronts. There's the domestic program, and then there is the national team program. National team program has gone way beyond what any of us have expected, and it's still just going up. Domestically, still need to do a lot of work to penetrate Israeli culture and become like a mainstream sport in Israel. So those are sort of the two different ways to think of it, I think.
Yeah. I think that there's also one of the interesting pieces is that the development of the game has brought a lot of attention. And John has mentioned he's gone over there a few times. John, when you and a lot of these players also, which is really interesting to say, is that John happens to have grown up and Nate with sort of a very strong Jewish background, but a lot of the players did not. In fact, when I spoke with some of them, maybe they had a parent Jewish, but either didn't recognize as Jewish and have, because of their experience in Israel, sort of like like the idea of birthright also, where you go there, you experience it, and then you start to dig deep into your life and your heritage. And some of those guys have expressed that to me, that they never imagined what would happen. So, John, when you went over there, did you meet a lot of kids who were not Jew? Did you meet any kids that were not Jewish? Nate, are some of the players in Israel? Do we have Arab Israeli players playing in the leagues? And how is that? How are we promoting it to other sort of sects of individuals for baseball in Israel?
Go
ahead, John.
Okay, you want me to take it?
Why don't you start and then I'll add.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, to your point, Jeremy, guys on the team, all different walks of life. Everybody is Jewish, but at some capacity, they may not have known that they were as Jewish as they now feel or identify with after the experience of traveling to Israel, being a part of this team. So in that respect, it's brought out a lot of some deeper roots in people's lives and understanding who they are and where they come from. And it's been really cool to kind of see guys come over to Israel as I have family there and strong ties and a very strong Jewish identity. But some of the guys didn't have that and are finding that in themselves now as they go through this with Team Israel. And it's not that they weren't Jewish before, but it's just that their exposure to Judaism growing up may not have been the same as if they grew up in Israel, right? In the United States, one parent Jewish. So that was cool to watch them walk through the old city and see some things that, blew their minds. And just all of the things that the IAB put on for all of us when we went over there to get our citizenship. It was amazing. Every time that we've gone over, it's been a great experience. And then seeing the kids, to answer the second part of that question, I'll let Nate touch more on this as he goes, because he knows more about it than I do. But, just from an American's perspective, or as I'm now an American Israeli, but going over there as an American prior to being an Israeli citizen, I came over and saw, even 5 years ago, kids that, I was like, wow, there are a lot of kids out here playing, but from 5 years ago to now, there's even more, right? So like there are more players getting out on the field. They're all walks of life. Last trip we went out there, we went to a school that was for, for Arabs, for Jews, and we went out there and we hit wiffle balls and went out and played. And it was really fun. It was just all inclusive. It was a special experience. And I know that the goal is for everybody to be able to play baseball in Israel. And I think that it's slowly picking up as baseball becomes more popular and as it becomes more of a mainstream sport. But like Nate said, we still have some work to do to get there.
Nate?
Yeah. So as far as sort of promoting the game within different communities in Israel, when I was there, we started a program called Baseball Lekulam, Baseball for All. And it was to bring Arab Israeli and Jewish Israeli kids together to play. Like every sport, there's an opportunity to cross over these cultural lines and, play by this common set of shared rules and learn something together. And that program is still going on. It's a huge success. The kids are still friends. There's hundreds of kids that have now gone through this program. We do have programs in some of the schools where the Arab Israeli kids go. So that was a big step for us. I think up until that point, the IAB just coincidentally had only had, I think, Jewish Israeli players. But crossing over that line and trying to bring people together and using baseball as sort of an educational tool was really, really powerful. And it's something that's still going on. So, yeah, there's a lot of, coexistence through baseball happening in Israel.
Yeah, and I do know that there are Arab players. Just none have qualified for the national teams yet. But as Nate said, that's incredibly crucial. And sports in general, I think basketball, soccer, these are ways to really, really bring people together where you get to know someone on their most intimate level of competition and teamwork. And because if one of you doesn't succeed, then none of you succeed. And that is absolutely, it's like you begin the conversation with what we can do together, not what divides us apart. So that's been incredible. Nate, I want to touch back and go back a little bit to the sort of the first iteration of Team Israel, where we came up very short of qualifying for the WBC. They brought back Sean Green, and Jock Peterson played for that team, which really was we all sort of knew Jock would be great, but we didn't realize how great he would be. So tell us a little bit about that, and did it become a more motivating factor for us to really be so successful in the next level?
Sure. So, like I said, we were invited by Major League Baseball in 2012 to qualify for the 2013 World Baseball Classic. On paper, we were by far the best team there, like the guys that you just mentioned. But Brad Ausmus managed. Gabe Kapler was the bench coach. They're both big league managers now. Very, 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 very smart and qualified staff. Lots of good players. Green. A lot of the guys either made it up to the big leagues or had extended careers in the minor leagues with a lot of success. And like I said, international baseball is weird. Anything can happen. We ended up losing to Spain in extra innings, and just sitting sort of in shock. We thought for sure as the better team we were going to make it to the tournament. But one of the things we've learned, I think, throughout the story of Israel baseball is every time we have a little failure, a few years pass, and you look back and you realize how it actually contributed to the success. So when we got invited back in 2016 to try and qualify for the 2017 tournament, there were 13 either staff members and players that came back. And guys had really, really been focused on this for 4 years. I mean, it was a real stain for some of the players and coaches, and we really wanted to get it right. And, guys had extended their careers just to be able to come back and do this. I know Josh Zeid had been on the mound in 2012 when we lost. He extended his career just to come back and pitched great for us. Really wanted to redeem himself and the group. And we ended up winning the qualifier. And then, Josh was huge. Throughout the whole thing, I think Josh ended up making the all-world team. So if you look at the all-world team from the 2017 World Baseball Classic, it's like Jose Altuve, Miguel Cabrera. It's like all these bona fide major league superstars, and Josh Zeid is the pitcher. I think he threw 10 scoreless innings. So those kinds of redemption stories have been a theme with us as individuals and as a group. So, 2012 hurt a lot, and 4 years is a long time between competitions. But the fact that we ultimately came back and sort of made it right, it felt good for everybody.
Yeah, Josh. If Josh would have had the success he had with Team Israel, he would have been a dominant pitcher in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
It was incredible. So let's talk a little bit, John, about the Aliyah process. So you went over, how did it begin here, and who convinced you to do it? And I'm using "convince" in quote because maybe it's something you just wanted to do, anyways. And then the process in which you went through and going over to Israel.
Yeah, I think that process started back when I was supposed to be on that 2016-17 World Baseball Classic team and blew out my elbow for Tommy John surgery, and was watching at 2-3 a.m. in the morning, like yourself, on the West Coast, those games over in Korea, and just obviously rooting for the guys that I had been on a trip to Israel with, but at the same moment, like panging in the heart to be able to be out there and help them win, you know? So when I got a phone call from Peter Kurz saying, hey, we're putting this team together, we need everybody to be Israeli citizens, it was like, all right, how fast can I get on a flight to Israel? Let's do this thing, right? I obviously have a little bit different of a background in the sense that I have family there, so it made a lot of sense to me to do. But I think all of us, when the opportunity was presented to be a part of this, to be this is something special, and we all jumped at it and decided that it was right. And so we took a trip over to Israel. We went through the process at the I'm forgetting the name of the building in Hebrew, but the government agency. We went in to get our passports. And, we spent a week there, the Interior Ministry. We spent over a week and a half, I think, running camps, doing some of the, seeing the country for those that had not been there. It was a great experience. But as far as the actual process of getting Aliyah or making Aliyah, it was pretty simple. You had to prove that you were Jewish. And Jeremy, I know that you've been instrumental for a lot of guys in that process. And just, get proof of Judaism, your mother, and then go over, have the documentation, had to do a background check. Can't just go over and be some random guy trying to apply for citizenship in Israel. They don't let that fly there. So, we all got that process done, and credit to the Interior Ministry and to Peter and to Yaron, who's our treasurer with the organization. And those guys, they all set it up great, and it was a smooth, easy process for us.
Yeah. So John, I wrote and sat with some of these players and wrote their Aliyah letters. I've never seen Misrat Hapanim in Israel work so fast, but that just goes to show you how quickly Israel is growing in baseball. I've sat in that office for hours and no response. So it's amazing. And let's talk about representing your country, being Israel, on a global level. What has that meant to both of you? Let's start with Nate. Maybe, what does it mean to wear Israel's name across your chest in all these different countries and playing all these different countries?
Yeah, it's different. I mean, I also played and coached for the United States in various tournaments. Part of it comes from part of the feeling that everyone shares comes from your teammates, and knowing that, like we keep talking about, that there's this commonality and this bond between you and your teammates because of your shared heritage. And part of it comes from knowing that lots of other people on the outside, how much this means to them. Older people, younger people that are looking up to you, older people that are looking back at their lives, and that our participation in these tournaments means a lot to a lot of people. So it is just a lot of pride. I mean, when we stand out in the national anthem plays, it's usually a real moment for the guys. Regardless of their, how much Jewish education and with their personal background, everyone really feels the significance of the moment. So, it's different. It's a lot different than even representing America.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, I guess that that moment encapsulates the best when I think about being in Germany, playing against the German national team on their home turf this winter, and Hatikva playing before the game, and going out there and beating them in a battle. I mean, it was a battle, and they didn't like it. They didn't like it one bit. Their fans didn't like it. The team didn't like it, and we loved it. You know, it was awesome to be able to wear that across our chest and to be able to say, yeah, we just did that, you know, and then basically eliminate them from moving on to the qualifiers for the Olympics. And just standing there on the line wearing Israel in that moment, I was just so proud to be Jewish and so proud to be out there and be a part of a group of guys that were, you know, selfless and just wanted to do this for the country. You know, it wasn't any personal goals. There wasn't any individual, you know, expectations. It was just, how do we get this team to win? And I think that's, like Nate said a couple of times, the best part of being on this team, is I've been on a lot of teams and I've never had as much fun playing baseball, just because of the fact that everybody out there has the same like-minded goal. And when you got that going on, and there's not individualism and individualistic, you know, expectations for yourself, you're primed for a good time, and you're primed to win.
Yeah, I think there were so many amazing moments so far in the, you know, the short amount of time we've seen these things, you know, from the hilarious, like, Cody Decker mensch on the bench stuff, to watching, like, a guy like Blake Galen resurrect his career, to Jason Markey taking the ball and throwing a real major league pitcher and wearing that. But the moment that stuck out for me, it's still, every time I see the picture, it just gives me chills, is everyone standing across, I think it was the first baseline, and wearing a kippah and listening to Hatikva. And I couldn't imagine, I could never in my life imagine something like this. And that just goes back to how amazing of a job Nate and Peter and the players have done to come together. I want to talk a little bit about Major League Baseball. It's starting up again. Nate, how much do Israelis pay attention to American baseball? So we've talked a little bit about the growth of baseball in Israel, but what about, like, did they know some of these players before they came over? When Ian Kinsler was only there for 2 seconds, but, you know, does that name resonate for them? A Major League All-Star who happens to have some Jewish heritage.
Yeah, for some of them. So a lot of the kids that are in the baseball program in Israel, within this group of about 1,000 kids that are playing, you know, they're little baseball fans, like you would find in any American city. They wake up and check, you know, what happened the day before. They stay up late and watch games, and they're pretty tuned in to what's going on in Major League Baseball. Throughout the years, there's been lots of guys that have come to visit. Rabbi Cano came one winter. Derek Lee came. Mariano Rivera was in Israel for a time. We didn't get a chance to work with him and meet him. But because Israel's a destination for, you know, athletes in the off season, sometimes you get guys traveling there, and we have the opportunity to bring them out and have a little meet and greet with the kids. But definitely one of the critical things that Team Israel for the World Baseball Classic and the Olympics has done is give the kids in Israel Jewish role models within baseball to look up to. It's a huge part of developing the game, is having role models and looking at someone and saying, I want to be like that. And, you know, I want to play baseball because look at this guy. He's a professional athlete, Jewish guy. I want to be like him. And it's one of the critical things in developing the game in Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you see yourself on the field, or whatever industry, by the way, it's not just baseball. When you see, can you imagine yourself on the field or in a position, and that goes for minorities, that goes for countries, it makes it a lot easier for the next generation to envision this happening. One question came in, how this transfers back into the States. How is Israeli baseball accepted in the United States? So, John, have you heard back from some of your friends after you went over there in terms of what they saw, what they were thinking, and how that has measured for them?
Yeah. Yeah, I have. I use an example that's a little bit of a. So Tyler Skaggs, who passed away a couple years ago, was one of my best friends, and Tyler's wife is Jewish. And Tyler was so excited to play for Israel in 2 years at the World Baseball Classic when we had come back or after the World Baseball Classic, and I was telling him that he needed to play and all this, that, and the other. And that's just one example, right? Like we had Kevin Pillar on a call a couple weeks back who said he would be playing for the World Baseball Classic team. I'm friends with Jock Peterson, who said, hey, yeah, like I want to strap back up, let's do it again. So I think that the more success that we have and the more that, the more success we have out in the Olympics and on the world stage and I foresee that all of those players who maybe were once too big time to play for Israel are going to be excited to put on that Israel across their chest and step out on the field. The sky's the limit, right? It gives Peter Kerr some leverage to go talk to Alex Bregman and some of these guys who again, might have thought at one point in time that they were too big time for it. And we're hoping that's no longer the case because we're getting to be pretty big time ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually spoke with Bregman right before he accepted the USA invitation, which, he is one of the best players in baseball. And he told me that really for him, he didn't want to travel too far and the opportunity just to stay local. But we did hear from Kevin Pillar, who is hoping to play in the next WBC. I mean, that's a major name who's a significant player right now and having a great start to the season in Boston. So, absolutely, we're going to see some of those guys, things that we couldn't have imagined with, Nate, to just come back to your college roommate. I could imagine a guy like Kevin Youkilis in his day would have loved to have seen and done something like this. Of all the Jewish players in his era, he's certainly the most outspoken. So, that's a question. Do you think Youkilis could ever have a role on this team, Nate? Have you ever given him a nudge to see how he could be involved?
Yeah, for sure. We're in touch a lot, and he should. I mean, I think he's a special assistant with the Cubs now. Still goes to spring training, works with some guys, does some batting practice. He's a great baseball person, and he could add a lot to the coaching staff. And there's no reason why he shouldn't be with us at some point for one of the upcoming events.
Yeah. So, and if we talk about the history, so John was a part of this event that we did a few weeks ago to support Team Israel, which was an all-time Jewish baseball draft. And John did get drafted. Here we're looking at some of these pictures. There's Ty Kelly, who was also at this draft, sliding into third. It was interesting because we wanted to have more teams, but then Peter and I looked at all the players in the history of Jewish baseball and realized we had a lot of catchers, a lot of first basemen, even pitchers, but man, were we lacking at second base and shortstop. I don't know if that's like a Jewish plague that is taking us over, but we just didn't have. I mean, we were digging to find some of these guys. So, John, when we look back at sort of the draft and history of Jews in baseball, is there a moment that sticks out for you when you were a kid? Obviously, the Sandy Koufax moment is the biggest, right? But was there a player that you sort of connected to, Nate? Also, was there a player that you loved as a kid growing up? Or was that role model for you in your childhood?
Yeah, I would say I grew up in Southern California, and my dad would always take us to the Dodgers-Mets games. My dad was a huge Mets fan, so we'd always go out and watch those games. And I'd always see Sean Green, right? And then I heard that Sean Green was sitting out for Yom Kippur one year, and that to me was this sealed the deal. It was like, all right, man, you're my hero.
Yeah.
So I'm not a hitter by any means, but that moment to have Sean Green, to look up to that guy, and then he was on a call with us during that draft. And on that draft, he came on for a moment and talked, and that was it was so cool, man. It's such a cool experience to be able to share the room with him and look up to a guy like that. And obviously, for the pitching side, it would be Sandy Koufax. I think every young Jewish baseball player wants to be Sandy Koufax. But yeah, that was my idol.
Yeah, it's important to note also Sean is just a mensch. I mean, he really is just a great guy.
Totally.
Yeah. Nate, what about you?
I grew up in New England, born in Vermont, lived in New Hampshire, so the Red Sox were our closest team. You know, I love those teams. I don't remember relating to any of them, and because none of them were Jewish, I don't remember relating sort of a Jewish player as a role model. But one funny story: my mom had grown up in Boston, and she liked Ted Williams, like all Boston fans. And I always thought Ted Williams was Jewish because my mom liked him so much. So it turns out he's not. But I just put the two together.
Yeah, Ted Williams. Although, you know, it's interesting in Tampa Bay at the stadium, there is because some of the ownership is Jewish. There's like a Jewish Hall of Fame wall, and also Ted Williams. It's like they're like next to each other, so it's not so far apart.
Okay, all right.
I want to run through a list of some of the Jewish baseball players that we have today, because it's not just growing in Israel. It is growing in America as well, and that, as John pointed out, is going to have a reciprocal event, because some of these players eventually should come over and play. So Richard Blyer and Ryan Lavarnway are both on the Marlins right now. You could have a pitcher and a catcher, which we have seen before. There was a Red Sox team that had 4 Jewish major leaguers. Ryan Braun plays for the Brewers. We spoke about Alex Bregman. You know, you can make a case that, you know, Mike Trout is in his own category. After Mike Trout, that he could be the best player, best hitter in baseball. Max Fried is a top-line pitcher for the Braves. Jack Peterson still for the Dodgers. Kevin Pillar's with the Red Sox. And then Rowdy Tellez is with the Blue Jays. And there's just a handful of other guys who are very close. Robert Stock, who's been up before in the majors. Garrett Stubbs, who's been up in the majors. And so we're seeing sort of an influx. I agree with John. As I was a kid, we're at similar ages. It was Sean Green. And that's really all you really knew and had. I mean, there were some other players, but none of them on the main stage. And the guys I just named, all of them are productive major league players. And that's going to trickle into sort of our success for Israel and the growth of Israel baseball. We have a few minutes left. I want some, last sort of thoughts. Nate, where are we going with baseball in Israel and its relationship to America, and what can we expect next?
We're going to the Olympics, man. That's the next thing, I think the Olympics will be even more impactful than the World Baseball Classic because it just has so much power. It transcends. There were people in Israel didn't even know the World Baseball Classic was going on. Everyone's going to know that the Olympics are going on. It's going to have a real impact. I think it'll be, considerably bigger as far as the impact that it has in the baseball community in Israel. I think we'll see a little growth after that. But we're just going to keep it rolling. I mean, Olympics, we got another World Baseball Classic, and like we always talk about on the domestic front, just continuing to raise money, build facilities, start youth programs. I mean, the bigger the base is, the more likely that we're going to get some quality players out of there when they're 18, 21 years old. So there's great momentum right now. We're in a really good spot. So and we got a big couple of years coming up. So yeah, that's it.
And John, you're going to be in shape and ready to go next summer?
Better believe it. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Again, to what Nate touched on, like we're doing this so that one day this team, the national team, is all Israelis, right? We want Israeli baseball to be ultimately at its grassroots level, feeding into players that are coming over and playing in the MLB from Israel, right? And that's the goal here. And I think that it's important to note that we know that that's not where it's at right now, but that is where we want to be. And ultimately we can't do that without, the proper funding and the proper, field work and groundwork at the grassroots level in Israel. And I know that the JNF has done a great job trying to set up ways to build facilities out there. Peter is working with them. He's working with a bunch of different organizations to get those things going. He's the head of the IAB, and Jordy Alter as well. Just everybody who's involved is pushing to get this game moving in the right direction over there, and it already is by a long shot. But just keep keep progressing it, making it better. And not only do those generous donations, do they help us with the team with Israel go to the Olympics and play in the Olympics, but they help the country over there in the grassroots level of baseball. So just even everyone who joined on today, thank you for coming on and watching us talk. I know hopefully we had some entertaining stuff.
Yeah, so I want to thank John and Nate for their time. I'm going to quickly plug my website, thegreatrabino.com. You can learn all about John and Nate and all other Jewish sports-related stuff. And it's really incredible. And I think this is when Wayne reached out, this is such a perfect platform because baseball growing needs America to help it grow, as John said, so Israel can get better and then and it's just another way for us to build friendships and connections. And I think there's roles to be played. I found a role with the team, even though I'm not playing for the team. Obviously, Nate and John have found different roles. And so there's opportunity there to be involved, and supporting and giving is one of those. And going over in Israel and making sure it's a part of your visit is crucial for its growth. So thank you to Wayne and everyone. And I'm gonna hand it back to the master.
Well, I don't know if I'm the master, but I will say that John and Nate, thanks for taking us into the dugout today, because this felt like a conversation that is unknown and less known, but needs to be shared. And with the help of the great Rabino, we now have a platform to be able to follow you. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. We're going to follow you and support you on to Tokyo. We don't know, obviously, when it'll be, what the exact circumstances, but this is an amazing story, and not just the Jamaican bobsled story. So in order to get your team there, we know you're going to need support. So there were a couple questions, and John referenced it. We will put up, we will send to everyone a link so you can follow and support. And if you want to donate to the team, so you have that ability afterwards. You can share this episode with your friends and other sports fans who are interested in baseball, and feel like you're a part of a bigger team and another tribe. We've had people call in today that are Houston Astros fans and San Diego Padres fans and Cincinnati Reds fans, and you know what it feels like to be a part of a team and how important it is to encourage and egg everyone on. Nate and John just giving of themselves to share in the middle of a work day. And really, Rabbi Jeremy Fine, who not only is a baseball enthusiast, but really understands and appreciates sports and how that builds bridges. And at the America-Israel Friendship League, that's what we do. That's our business. We build friendships. And we know that happens in dugouts in amazing and powerful ways. We know that happens in competition across the field. And these are values that we see that are common between the United States and Israel. We want to do everything possible, to celebrate that and really make people feel a part of it. For now, if you happen to know any 10 and 12-year-olds, we are running a daily free program called Betweens for kids both in Israel and in the United States. And I got to tell you, this is the highlight of my day this summer, is watching an hour of Israeli and American kids going back and forth, discussing their differences, their similarities, and otherwise. It's a great program. So if you actually know grandchildren or others in either of the countries that are looking for a fun interchange, we're going to continue it going on even beyond the summer with all the disruptions going on. So take a look at our website, take a look at the different activities that we have that you can certainly follow through our different social media channels, and that we will send out to everyone that's here a recording of not only this episode, but of recent episodes from the past couple of weeks. If you don't have plans for Sunday and you need a place to go, how about Akko? That's our next virtual tour. It's an amazing place. We hope you'll join with us. Everybody have a safe week. And again, thanks for being with us for America-Israel Friendship League.